as you said, there's a silence, then there's speech, and but what is interpreting? What is creating a me and a you over there? A sense of separation. What is the because we've talked many times, and you've said that you feel that sense of separation. You feel that isolation, that sense of loneliness, fear. I experience that myself. So what is that? What is what is creating that in our lives or at this table?
I don't know that it's a great question. I'm not sure how I can answer it. Maybe it's fear.
What forms does that fear take?
I mean, for me, like in the end, it comes down to death. Like that's where it ends, and because I have this kind of issue with like my physical mortality, that's I think why it feels like a little bit lonely. I mean, there's always a passing away, right? Isn't there? Even though this thing is great and we're here and we're present in this moment and like together we get to like a place that we couldn't otherwise get to, but it's falling away all the time, isn't it?
Well, during our talks, we talked about death and to look how it's manifesting now. And what I've experienced is that in past experiences, like you've described past experiences, near death, in thoughts, in the knowledge that, or the future projection, that death is a state in the future that we're going to be a part of in some way. So the whole content of this conscious movement of thought and activity, even while we're here, is in some way projecting a death or
certainly.
And it's a lot, like we have these concepts, like these preconceptions that come from like what many people would call, they look at the past, they'd like try and carry something from the past forward. Like they're like you can think of like when you have a memory of what, like let's say I have a memory of what I would normally think of as a bad experience, and then like my brain says don't do that again or this is going to happen. And how do I know that that's going to happen again? Like let's say, like I don't know, but my brain is telling me you can't do this because this is going to happen from this, and it doesn't want that, it's afraid, and it's like these preconceptions of what's going to happen from.
So we have preconceptions about death.
And so many things.
And so many things.
Yeah, I mean, if you unpack that question of death, I mean, it sounds like, on one hand we immediately all buy into, what it means to be, I'm afraid for death. Then if you have to dig into it, we don't know what death is. So somehow, it's a funny question. The fear for death is not so much the fear for death, but it's actually the fear for not having that anymore, that, your whole safety structure, how I make sense of my life, that's something I know. I suspect that safety structure doesn't function anymore there. At the end of that, so actually it's a fear of having to let go of that whole safety structure. All the things that I've put in place to have some comfort around that.
It doesn't feel that way though. Why does it not feel that way? Is it like to go back to the image that you had before about like a mistranslation of something? Is that what you sort of think is going on there?
Well, I think what I said. I think it doesn't end by saying I'm afraid of death.
No.
One has to look further.
Yeah.
So when I say I'm afraid of, you don't know that, so you don't. So it's what is that? What is coming up not as a conclusion, but just what is there's a kind of tangible an emotional tangible thing, which is very present, which has been given the name I'm afraid of death. And what is that, right?
And what is that?
What is it? And I would maybe suggest that it's in the area of that what we know of how we create security in our life, that is falling apart.
Okay, so when I talk about like the unknowability of death, I guess what I'm trying to get to is the experience of anxiety that we live with all the time, and which could be attached to any number of things, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, I don't know, like, and when I say, like, what would that look like what would happen if, like, for some reason you could, like, get rid of that anxiety in some way, or, like, transform it in another way, so, like, Heidegger, for example, he won't, like, he thinks that's, like, that anxiety is really important for us, like, it's one of the things that makes us human.
Is that anxiety essential? I mean, do you feel it's a part of the fabric of who you are?
I think it would be really false to deny it, right? And it's precisely because of its unknowability. Like, if you had some kind of security about what it was, then you wouldn't have the anxiety. But because we can never know such a thing, like, I don't know how you could get rid of the anxiety.
Getting rid of is like, okay, but it's more like, that is more closer to the question like, who am I? Right? Which is actually more as a religious question, or as an inquiry into the essence who I am. And so I start with, my God, I'm afraid of death, and then, my God, actually what I'm afraid of, and then it's actually about who am I, the content of my consciousness, right? Which is made up of all these elements, which are, and we're a little bit handicapped there, because we have already so many deep instilled beliefs and have made sense of the world that actually how we look at ourselves is already, but there's a sense of it. No, I'm looking objectively. I'm making clear deductions. I'm applying logic, but it's the brain is such a tricky thing. It's almost like, okay, I am in a trap, or I have an illusion there, but that even like it can see, sometimes it can see deduct objects of illusion, but that how deep these illusions are part of us is often, you get a sense, I understand my illusions, or I understand my frustrations, or I understand but that there's a deeper layer to it.
Right.
Actually, how we look at it itself, full stop, which that we're deeper in it than we think. You know what I mean? Than our. So just want to bring it.
Or ultimately, we're shallower, and there's a lot more beneath us that we're not seeing.
Yes.
Right? Like the levels of embedding, they're really deep, right? Like you think that you understand, what your issues are, or like what your illusions are, but then they're said in something else, and it's probably the case that those things are said in something else, like all the way down, which is kind of intense.
Yeah.
Because then, like you just kind of come back against yourself, where even that notion is itself.
Yeah, like, okay, I say to myself, or the thought comes up, the sphere, contraction, and say, I'm afraid of death, right? Now, what's actually the sequence of things happening is that some kind of, the brain makes some kind of association, something in the network of the brain is being brought into to life, and it doesn't really fully look at that particular response pattern.
The brain doesn't.
The brain doesn't actually, but it's coming into life. Otherwise, it couldn't be present. And then the conclusion, you separate yourself with the thought and say, "No, I'm afraid of death." But that. So how do I get contact with those particular elements actually that build up, which somehow are now in the subconscious, or in the layer that does respond, but it does somehow we're not really aware what's responding.
Like this has been an issue for me, like since I was like 13, like for a long time, and it doesn't it's not necessarily to do with any particular person.
Yes.
Like one of the things that I remember, I was 7, and their song "Fame" was kind of popular at the time, and I was with my family has an old cabin up in the mountains here. I was swinging on the swing, and I was like trying to sing like "I'm gonna live forever" that part of the song, and realizing that it wasn't true, but wanting it to be true, incredibly so, and being so kind of freaked out about that, about that, I knew it wasn't true, but I wanted to make it true, and that kind of instability, that's the thing I often jump to in my head when I'm saying I'm afraid of death. But I think that would be different for all kinds of people,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Like, but so that set of associations you have.
But
The associations can never meet life. You see, those associations happened wherever they happened in the past. But they're not right here in what's happening. And yet they think those associations continue to affect the present state of being. But they're not. The brain has made those associations, those old associations with the song, with the idea, with the complex network of being afraid or realizing a knowledge, and that's all carried into now. So in some way it is here, because you would say it's your experience, and yet we can both, see that these are just associations that the brain made in some time, which is not. No,
It's not the thing itself,
it's not the thing itself.
but you can't know what the thing itself is, and that's really like the
But
problem.
what do you mean by that?
Like death is one thing that like
But
seems
is-
really different among other things, right? That,
But
like,
is it a thing?
what,
Is it a
because
thing?
because
Sorry.
Go ahead.
like the way that we often know what a thing is by knowing like at least at the beginning its boundaries. Like if you talk about it phenomenologically, right? Like what is the table like, and you have some sense of a table like in shape, etc. Death is that thing which we can't know, and which like when you think about how it relates to life, like death will be the final moment
But-
against which you would understand a life, but it's that moment where life disappears. What were you gonna say?
Well, I mean, yeah, death could be like seems the ultimate manifestation of the unknown. But if we look at it, I mean, you end a relationship unknown. You move unknown, right? So I mean, death seems that there is like a parameter. The body is no longer sentient, right? But in terms of the psychological response to the unknown, we die every year, every month, don't we?
Yeah.
And this is another thing, Mark. You say death cannot be known, and yet this concept of death and all the experiences that are attached to it are essential in your life. But it cannot be known.
But it's a kind of the quest thing for me, right? Like it's the itch.
But you see, we've created a concept and a set of experiences and associations which relate to something totally unknown.
But it means it's not like it's not satiable. It's like whatever those things are that come to frame it in a given moment. Like I relate to those like all the other ones that I've related to, and those are my temporary illusions that and it, like I don't think I would often mistake them for something else. Like I'm not going to mistake that for truth. Like I know that this is going to continue to happen.
What?
Like dying, transformation, whatever.